Happy New Year and welcome to the all brand new look Skits and Quibbles. It's where the arts meet well-being. I'm Dr. Audrey Tang. You will have seen me present other versions of Skits and Quibbles, other episodes as Precocious Lotus. She's still around, but for now I wanted to focus on championing the creative industry. I'm the founder of an arts charity and we support grassroots arts projects that bring out the best in the community, that focus on well-being, on inclusivity, on connection, on creativity. Because I don't know about you, viewers out there, certainly in the UK, the arts are being defunded all the time, and that's a real shame because research shows that the arts and being involved in something creative can do so much for our well-being and our self-esteem. And it's not a case of linking that with competency. It's not a case of, oh, I'm good at dance, I'm good at drama, I'm good at music, and therefore I feel great. It's not that at all. It's I do drama, I do music, I do dance, and I feel great. And that's how important the arts are. So while in the past we have shared our stage with many different community groups, all championing the same thing, we are still going to be doing that, but our focus this year is on bringing in the creative industry experts. Last week we had Amy Dawes, musician. This week we've got author Philippa Cranston Barron, who has won the Firebird Book Award judges' pick, talking about the legacy of her brother, who is not only known in the arts world as a fabulous figure skater, but also an artist and the epitome of creativity. And creativity is what we're going to be focusing on today. So let's have a look with our brand new set, our brand new stage, at Toller Cranston and his legacy.
One thing that I think was something that I learned as a skater and brought into my painting was the idea of rhythm and never-ending line. And probably if I'd been a boxer, I would have painted like this and very geometrically. But with skating, the wonderful thing is you have movement without movement. And when I skate, I never end something. I always skate and I move. And my painting is the same. I just love a never-ending line that just keeps going and going and going, and that is really because of my my skating.
Here's Cranston at his most imaginative, combining his art and his skating in a TV production called Strawberry Ice. His paintings came to life on screen, and he became a character in their fantasy world.
With this particular show, which was very autobiographical, something that certainly was the main theme was the artist becoming the victim of the fantasy. There's no doubt that I am a victim of my fantasy.
Toller Cranston brought fresh ideas and new life to the world of skating. But in World Olympic competition, he also, in a sense, was a victim of his fantasies. For a long while, the judges didn't accept his flamboyant style, his highest finish in World or Olympic competition being an Olympic bronze. We asked what effect the lack of a gold medal had on him.
One thing about not winning a medal has done for me is that it has kept my career going, and I've tried a lot harder than all the other contemporaries that competed at the same time because I still had something to prove. Certainly a John Curry, a Dorothy Hamill, Peggy Fleming, they don't have to prove themselves to anybody because there's the golden medal and they've got it and they were Olympic champion, and that's a mighty big title. But for myself, like Janet Lynn, we still have something to say. We still have something to prove. And with this competition, I'm actually allowed to sort of pit my abilities one more time. And although I'm older, it's as though time has stopped, and I've been given that one more chance.
Well, with that one more chance, he's still been proving things. Earlier in the year on the Pro Skate Tour, he had 3 firsts and a second. Now, the International Professional Figure Skating Championships, Toller Cranston.
That combination showed the class that Toller Cranston has. A triple jump right into a beautiful stag in his own inimitable style. He really is, in my opinion, not only a classy performer, but a superb technician and just a marvelous, overall, great skater of all time.
There's a whole generation, though, that may not know Toller Cranston and what he did for the sport. 6-time Canadian champion, the numbers and everything. But here's the other things. Member of the Ontario Sports Hall of Fame, Canadian Sports Hall of Fame, Canadian Figure Skating Hall of Fame, Order of Canada, Walk of Fame. Yet Toller Cranston didn't do it for any of that stuff. And some people liked his style. Some people didn't like his style, whether it was skating or whether it was broadcasting or storytelling. The thing about Toller is you couldn't ignore him.
Absolutely not. And he took a rather staid at times sport and he made it come alive. He was electric. It was so exciting to watch. And he had a universal appeal. It certainly wasn't just here in Canada. As Brian Orser said, he changed the sport worldwide.
Welcome to Skits and Quibbles, Philippa. It is a real pleasure to chat with you, and congratulations on winning the Firebird Book Awards Judges' Pick for your story about your brother, Toller Cranston.
Thank you, Audrey. It's a very great pleasure to be here, and I'm extremely pleased and gratified that you support the Firebird Book Awards. It means a lot to all of us.
I think it's really important to continue to support the creative industry because I don't know about yourself, but certainly in the UK, we're finding that the arts are getting less and less respect, despite the fact that the arts give so much to the community.
That's absolutely true. You know, when little kids are in school, they can sing, they can dance, they can play, they can draw, they can imagine, they can create, and bit by bit, it sort of gets squished out of them. Yeah. And I think one of the reasons that this book about Toller Cranston is so important is the message that it communicates to young people. His motto, and the motto by which he lived, was be creative now. And I think it is an important message. So whether it's coming from schools or government, it is important that a climate of creativity be cultivated and fostered for people of all ages, but certainly starting with the kids.
Yes, absolutely. And your brother was really such an embodiment of creativity, not only in the ice skating world, but as an artist. And I really can't wait to hear all about him. So please tell me about the book.
I knew my brother had been living in Mexico for 23 years and died of a massive and absolutely unexpected heart attack at the age of 65. And my husband and I knew instantly the very day, within a day or two, that the task of building and consolidating and creating his legacy would fall to us. So we knew that we had a job to do. And the book seemed to be the obvious way to go, but I wasn't sure. I really didn't have a clear vision of how it would work. And I also knew right from the get-go, although I have experience and worked as a writer in film and television for many years, I would never presume to write about LGBT issues or about the politics in figure skating or about contemporary art. I could write about a lot of other things. So what I did was invite people who did have the credibility and experience and wisdom to comment on those kinds of things. And that resulted in a book that actually has contributions from 150 different people that created almost a mosaic of my brother's life. He was complicated, he was complex, he was many things on many different days to many different people. But I think having the perspective of people that competed with him, who loved him, who knew him, who had never met him in their life, but were profoundly moved by how he lived his life and what he stood for, that created a much richer tapestry. And with the result that the book is resonating with people really all over the world, because people see themselves reflected in a struggle to be accepted, a struggle to be authentic, a struggle to be creative, a struggle to get the arts recognized as something serious and worthwhile. Those are the messages that I'm most proud of, and they come through not just from me and not just from how my brother lived his life, but from how people all over the world of many different ages saw him and viewed him and were impacted by what he did.
I think that's so beautiful. And the book is called Toller Cranston, Ice, Paint and Passion. And it's just so already inspiring. And with Toller, how would you describe his legacy? You've described this beautiful mosaic, and he means so many different things to different people. Can you put that legacy into a genre or a statement?
I'm not actually sure that I can, but what I can say is that over the last 6 or 7 months since the book has been out, it's been funny and kind of wonderful when I meet people at book events and so on. People invariably fall into his manner of speaking, his manner of gesticulating, where he talked a lot with his hands. Almost echoes of his voice seem to come through, and it's almost as though, for me, the courage that he stood for and the push to be truly authentic for his whole life is something that's dribbled into people. And people are as indignant now as they were 50 years ago when he was robbed by the figure skating judging establishment. People are as thrilled thinking about how they felt when they watched him skate all those years ago. And there's something really immediate about his legacy, is the only way I can put it, that I believe will carry on.
Oh, yes, definitely. And he was an artist on ice. He was an artist in the studio, an artist in his life. He had zero tolerance for giving less than his all. And this is what comes through. And I really like this. He wrote a book called Zero Tolerance, which is a fabulous name. And his tombstone in San Miguel de Allende in Mexico reads Toller, artist, 1949 to 2015, zero tolerance. That authenticity, that standing for what you believe in, that zero tolerance. Can you tell me a little bit more about that, please?
Well, he was extremely outspoken. He certainly never held back from what he thought. And a lot of times, in fact, most times, he would heavily embroider what it was that he thought. So he was flamboyant, he was outrageous, he was extremely outspoken. But I understood early on after he died, and I was really immersing myself in his life, that he was very, very aware that to be that outspoken, you had to be that good. And he worked every single day of his life. He put in more hours than anybody I've ever met in my entire life. He had an Olympian work ethic from his skating, of course, but even in the 20-some years he lived in Mexico, he would be up at 5 in the morning when it would still be cool and there wouldn't be so many distractions, painting. And he just worked, and he was constantly striving to be better, striving to improve with his skating, with his paintings, of course. But also he was involved in a lot of other creative activities. He designed carpets, he designed upholstery, he had Mexican craftspeople make things for him in metal. He had an extraordinary imagination. He wrote 9 books. Well, I think actually it was 6. I'm falling into his habit of exaggerating. But he was intensely creative, but in order to pull off what he was doing, he had to be good. And so for me, the message to work harder than you could ever imagine, to be better than you ever dreamed to be, is something that resonates with me, certainly, and with other people.
Yes, definitely. And with that resonation with other people, it said everyone has a Toller story, and I think that's great. And what's your favorite Toller story? Do you have one of those in your book, or do you have your own that you'd care to share?
I really don't. I would say that my favorite is the last one I heard, and I'm hearing new Toller stories a couple times a week, sometimes every day. So I don't have a favorite. And I know I was thinking this morning about a couple of stories that I might share, and I don't have a single one, but the story about him throwing his skates in the canal was kind of pivotal, and that's legendary. There are great battles that continue to rage on Facebook about Toller Cranston threw his skates in the canal. Did he really, or where was it, or so on? Anyway, the book tells the whole story of that, but that is significant because at that time, it was 1976, I believe, the technical component of figure skating was his undoing. And it wasn't that his school figures were so dreadful. They weren't. It was a way that the judges could keep this flamboyant talent kind of down. They would mark him down, and he would have to struggle to get a place on the podium from 5th or 6th or 7th after the figures. But the year that the figures were to be ended, they would never happen again, was a year he was in Sweden, competing in Sweden, and there's this whole charade that's hysterically funny where he took a bag with his skates out onto a bridge and over a canal in Sweden and hurled his skates backwards over his head into the canal. But then the story became very crazy because some unknown benefactor had hired police divers to dive into the bottom of this filthy canal in March in Sweden and retrieve Toller Cranston's skates. So it was kind of a ridiculous and very funny story, but it marked a flamboyant gesture that was a milestone turning point in his career, and he finished off his career with school figures in figure skating with a hysterical gesture, great public relations, great fanfare, great excitement and interest, and that's really how he lived his life, creating a series of events that were funny, outrageous, memorable, but carried a deeper message.
Oh, yeah, and that really comes across. We're going to watch a video about his art in a moment. How should we describe him, though? Is he a skater who painted or a painter who skated? Because he's as flamboyant and as phenomenal at both.
He was, and he would certainly consider himself to be an artist, period. Just period. He dreaded and loathed if he was ever referred to as a skater who painted. For him, the painting was in his heart, in his soul, in his DNA, or the creation of creating paintings. And for him, the skating was simply an extrapolation of that onto the ice. He had the feeling of movement in his paintings, the feeling of fluidity, of line, of grace, of style. But on ice, it was a way to give physical expression to that. So he was definitely a painter first, but he would prefer just to be simply artist, which is why I didn't put Cranston. He was known worldwide just as Toller, and Toller artist is how I believe he would have wanted to be remembered.
Well, let's have a look now at Toller, artist.
spectator. Later it becomes the posterity, who, from the labyrinth beyond time and space, seeks his way out to a clearing. Who, from the labyrinth beyond time and space.
Toller was very acclaimed as an artist and to some extent more prolific than Picasso. So how does a Canadian figure skating champion become this international successful artist? And what makes his art so unique?
I don't know. I couldn't exactly say, but I can say that it was absolutely true. When he was 18, he made his first bank loan ever to buy frames for his paintings, and he had his first art show when he was 18, and it completely sold out. And I can't explain why it was that his work connected with people, but I can say that it did then, and it has now, and it has 10 years now since he passed away. It's still connecting with people. And I think Gallerus told me once that there are essentially three criteria in an important artist. One is the art recognizable? Can you drive past it at 50 miles an hour and recognize a Picasso, a Warhol? Yes, you can, Matisse, and you can with Toller Cranston as well. So there's a distinctive style. And secondly, does the artist have a track record? If you Google the artist, are there mentions of him? And in the case of Toller, partly because of the skating, of course, and the Olympic world level competition, but also because of his over-the-top personality. He was very articulate, outspoken, and funny. He was an amazing raconteur. So yes, there are literally hundreds of thousands of references to Toller Cranston. And thirdly, does the art sell? And yes, it does. It sold from the time he was 18. His works are continuing to sell. They've managed, I think with some help from me and the galleries that have supported him, the value has stayed high. With 90% of artists, after they pass away, the value of their work goes down. But with Toller, it stayed up, it stayed high, it stayed steady. In fact, it's increasing. And I think I've seen the work in very extremely ultra-modern homes. I've seen it in, great stately mansions. I've seen it in modern apartments. I've talked to people who've scraped together every penny they had to buy a piece, to buy a print. People have told me they bought a poster when they were 18 years old, and now 50 years later, they've moved 15 times, had 2 marriages and 5 kids, but they still have that poster. There's something about his work that connects with people, and I couldn't begin to explain it, but it is real.
That actually leads me on to the next question really beautifully, because it's Georgia O'Keeffe who once said, I found I could say things with colour and shapes that I couldn't say any other way. And what you're describing is the ability of an artist to express and connect with that expression other people who also may not have the words. I mean, I know it's difficult to kind of put it into words, but how do you think Toller was able to create that magic on ice as well as on all the canvases he created?
He had such discipline, he had such physical control of his body because of 30, 40 years of figure skating, which is highly disciplined, technical, creative, of course, but at the foundation there's a training and a discipline and a technique, because he believed in practice and repetition and improving and getting better. He believed in studying, so he studied music for his skating. He studied the works of other artists. He had a massive library when he died, which we were happy to donate to the Biblioteca in San Miguel. A combination of discipline, technique, desire to get better, and a need to be able to express with his body or with his paintbrush what he was thinking. And in order to do that, one needed the technique, one needed the discipline.
Yes.
The color, he would say that he painted Mexico without ever painting Mexico. So he didn't paint landscapes, he didn't paint outdoors, he wasn't exterior, but the color palette that he adopted is somewhat Mexican. There's a reds and golds and yellows and greens and those kinds of things. Not a lot of black, not a lot of charcoal, not a lot of gray.
Yeah,
Very
really.
colorful.
Yeah, it's capturing the vibrancy. That's fabulous. Now, another skater that we will have heard of as well is John Curry. And Toller's sometimes, not compared, but they both had an artistry. But what are their intersecting roles in skating history?
Well, it's interesting, and especially talking to you in Great Britain, John Curry was a hero and champion. They had immense respect for each other. I believe they were absolute contemporaries. And in those days in figure skating, one had to work one's way up the ladder. The judging was extremely difficult, very top-down, very oppressive. I don't think that's a secret. The establishment has made efforts over the last decades to change the judging system. But in those days, you had to wait your turn. And at a certain point in the early 70s, Toller was kind of next in line to become the top, to ascend to the top of the podium. Others ahead of him had retired or stepped aside, and he was next in line. And he got a phone call from a U.S. coach, Carlo Fassi, who had a stable of skaters in Colorado Springs in the U.S. And Toller got a phone call one day saying, Toller, you must come and skate here in the U.S. We'll give you lessons, we'll pay your expenses, there's a plane ticket waiting for you, and we will make you a world and Olympic champion. And Toller said, well, I have to leave my existing coach. And Fassi said, yes, of course you will. And Toller said, well, I can't do that. That's out of the question. Ellen Burka has meant everything to me. And no, I'm sorry, I can't come. And Mr. Fassi put down the phone and picked up the phone and called John Curry and called John and made him the same offer, which John accepted. And one can hardly blame it when a prospect of an Olympic gold medal is being dangled in your face. But I think Toller always was not embittered. No, maybe he was somewhat embittered, not because of John Curry, but because he never got to the top of the podium with his skating as he believed he should. But at the same time, that experience made him absolutely entrenched in his need to do better and to prove himself. He didn't have the Olympic medal around his neck that he felt was rightfully his. Of course, he had to go and earn it, and that's a different matter. But he did feel a fuel. He was fueled to continue to prove himself, to prove that the judges were wrong, to prove they'd made a mistake. So I don't believe it was ever anything personal about John Curry. Both Toller and John Curry were different skaters, very artistic, very unusual, and technically superb in different ways. Toller was more flamboyant. John Curry was more balletic. Anyway, John Curry got the Olympic gold medal and did not have a happy post-Olympic life or career and died quite young. And Toller went on for another 40 years, proving himself.
And we're going to watch a video in a moment of Toller skating. But just before we do that, Toller's a really unusual name. Do you mind sharing where that comes from and just a little bit about the background of the Cranston family?
Well, that's funny because Toller, T-O-L-L-E-R in German means fantastic, fabulous, or tall does, T-O-L. So Toller is like most fantastic, more fantastic. And when Toller began skating in Europe, and the newspapers were screaming Toller, Toller in Germany, it meant fantastic Toller, and he was really delighted. But in fact, Toller is a family name. It comes from our English side of the family history. And Toller, my grandmother's maiden name was Toller, so Toller inherited that. And the Tollers in Canada and the Cranstons in Canada came from a lineage that goes back to my great-great-grandfather owned the Stonehenge estate in England years ago. They formed the Chubbs. My mother's maiden name was Chubb, and the Chubb Safe Company in England came from there. Cranston is a Scottish name, so Toller Cranston is an amalgam of the family history of Scotland, England roots coming to Canada.
Oh, my goodness. Well, as we digest that as well, let's have a look at the fantastic Toller on ice. we've seen how incredibly Toller performed, and yet he didn't win that gold medal, but he still transformed figure skating in ways that's just brilliant that carry on, actually, that continue to influence others. Why didn't he win the gold? And I know that's a little bit about the politics, but I am curious. And how and why does he still impact figure skating so much?
He would say it wasn't in his destiny to win the gold.
Okay.
It just simply wasn't there. And there are, one can rail about the judging, and people still do. But, and the system of judging, the standards of judging, and so on. Anyway, he did not win the gold medal. But I don't think there's another skater who 50 years after they were competing as an amateur is still being talked about. There's almost never an international figure skating competition today in 2024, 2023, and 2022, and for the next 20 some years, where the name Toller Cranston won't come up. So whenever a skater of unusual style, they may or may not have the technique, but someone who is unabashed about expressing themselves appears on the international scene, which is increasingly difficult these days because the emphasis seems to be so much on the jumping and the technique. Whenever someone with extra creativity comes along, people say, oh, it's reminiscent of Toller Cranston, which it is. So I think the fact that he established a style of skating made it acceptable, especially for the men, to be able to be expressive, to be able to use every bone in their body, every fiber of their being to express themselves to music and to interpret. That's something for the skaters that feel figure skating in their heart. And again, like we were talking earlier, where art seemed to be under duress, creativity in figure skating is also under duress, where there's so much pressure for the jumping. Anyway, whenever somebody comes along that gives goosebumps to the audience, then Toller's name is invariably mentioned. And that's something that I'm extremely proud about. And right now there's a big discussion raging about figure skating, that it's become too high pressure just with the jumping and the landings and so on. But you could go to an arena and watch somebody knock off 4 quadruple jumps or 5 or whatever, and everybody would clap like crazy if they managed to land them, and and be very sad if they didn't. But they rarely have goosebumps, and they won't be talking about that performance 2 years down the road, never mind 20 years down the road.
Yes.
So it's something that makes people feel something that with any kind of art, and Toller definitely had that, and it exists to this day.
I know exactly what you're saying, because sometimes when I watch competitive skating, I am a bit not bored of jumps, because they're amazing. Of course, they're incredible and athletic, but I like skating shows, which are just the beauty and the artistry of the interpretation of the music, and I just can get lost in those. And I think that to me is something that I really, really enjoy. Let's just pull at that thread a little bit more about how Toller was treated by the figure skating industry. People are still outraged about this. So can you tell me a little bit about what happened, and are they right?
What is right are the fans. The fans are always right, no matter what the art is, or the play, or the movie, or the book, or the figure skating. The fans know. People know if they get goosebumps. They know if they suddenly find themselves on their feet screaming their heads off because something was so amazing they've never seen such a thing before. I think back in the 70s, when Toller was struggling to get to the top, and other skaters too, it was a very oppressive system that was extremely rigid and very difficult, and there wasn't much room for creativity and flexibility. But Toller mastered the technique. He was really quite superb, but he brought a great deal more to it. So he just, the audience is really what dragged the judging establishment into what figure skating could be. Before Toller Cranston, there weren't very many shows on television. There were, of course, big ice shows, traveling ice shows like Ice Capades and Holiday on Ice and so on, but nothing like the number of international competitions there are today and the number of television specials and shows and so on that involve skating. That came not entirely because of Toller, but he was at the absolute epicenter of the change in figure skating. It became the fans, the people, the supporters, the viewers, they dragged the sport into the future. And now it's actually falling off the radar again. There's not nearly as much international coverage of figure skating because, as you very correctly said, I'm old enough now that I don't care what people think, what I say. It frankly is boring. There's a lot of it that is just simply boring. You know, technically wonderful. We wish the kids all the best in the world, but it doesn't leave you with tears in your eyes. And I, and I'm not alone, would like to see more of that come back. And that can't happen until there's a bit of a shift in the establishment and they begin to admit that the artistry and the creativity is every bit as important as the technique.
You've absolutely said it. But to turn to you, and you touched on this, you don't care what people say. People have said some things to yourself, and your book jacket says, in the process of writing this book, Philippa had to deal with corruption, extortion, and threats by gun-toting thugs. Like her brother, she's not a quitter. That's horrendous. I mean, could you elaborate on some of those challenges and challenges, threats, really?
No, they were. Well, you know, Toller died. He dropped dead. He literally dropped dead. The coroner said that he was dead of a massive heart attack before he hit the floor of his studio. So all of us were plunged into, a completely uncharted territory for which there'd been absolutely no preparation. And I left Canada to go to Mexico to look after a funeral and to organize his affairs. And that eventually led to dismantling his estate and his property in Mexico. And I have to say, first of all, Toller loved Mexico more than anything. He was completely happy there every single day of his life. And I must say that I was treated so superbly well by the Mexican establishment, by the embassy, by the lawyers, by the realtors, by the bankers. Toller dealt at a very high level in San Miguel. He was respected, and I was respected, and it was great. But within not just Mexico, but there was an underbelly of corruption and graft. And so, yes, there were times when I had to pay grafts and bribes in order to get things done. There were times when I was threatened. There was a insanely stupid and ridiculous over-the-top lawsuit. You'll have to wait for the major motion picture to hear the details about that. But there was one day that I will never forget for the rest of my life. My lawyers, my Mexican lawyers, who were wonderful, the Martinez brothers, said, "Tomorrow, Senora, there are going to be men coming to your place. Do not be there. You must leave your place by 8 o'clock in the morning and don't return. There will be men coming to your place. Take your important possessions and get out of there." And I found myself at the age of 69 sitting in a park in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, with a brown paper shopping bag with my iPad, my passport, my money, and all my papers and stuff, sitting in a park and unable to go home. There was a lawsuit against me. There was a civil suit. There was a criminal suit. There was an embargo that had been placed by corrupt people on Toller's property, so I couldn't sell it. I knew that I couldn't get through the border to come home. I couldn't move the thing forward in Mexico. I'm 69 years old, weeping in a park with a brown paper shopping bag. That was definitely a low point. But I also knew that, and what got me through a million times were my husband and the people that supported me. But also I knew that Toller wasn't a quitter, and he had been oppressed by the figure skating establishment. He'd been held down. He'd been, forced to jump through hoops, and it wasn't working. And there was simply no question in my mind that if he could endure that, then I would endure this on his behalf. And I did, and lived to tell the tale. And there are many hysterically funny aspects to it, which at some point will come out in the next book or the next movie. But yeah, it was hard. And if I hadn't been 100% committed to this mission, I just would have bailed and come home, but I didn't. And so I believe my brother's legacy is stronger because of that. I believe he'll be remembered in Canada and internationally because I was able to persist and get through, and this book is a result of all of that struggle. So it stands for his struggle as well as mine. But also, it was joyous and amazing, and I don't regret a single minute.
I can see so much of his authenticity and determinism through you. It's really quite incredible. Just before we go to another video, do you mind just commenting on this statement? Because it's another form of oppression here. Toller was never openly out, but he is a very important icon to the LGBTQ plus community. That is another area of oppression that is getting better, but it still exists. Do you mind commenting on his status?
No, and thank you for the question, Audrey. I could comment on that now where I couldn't or wouldn't have presumed to 10 years ago or 20 or 30 or 40. And I struggled with, well, as I was beginning the book, beginning to put the pieces together, how on earth was I going to deal with that? But I very quickly found out that I didn't have to, because along the way I would interview people, different people from the LGBTQ community whose paths had crossed with Toller for one reason or another. And the story about the inspiration he was to that community going back to the 70s was absolutely amazing to me. So what I heard from these gay artists and poets and musicians and painters was Toller Cranston inspired me to be brave. Toller Cranston inspired me to be who I was. Toller gave me the courage to believe I could live an authentic life. And that touched me very deeply, that Toller was adamant in never ever discussing in any way gender, sexuality, partners, whatever. He refused. He simply flat out refused to discuss it. He wanted his work to stand for itself. He wanted himself to stand for itself. But what I discovered, and for which I'm extremely grateful, is the impact that he's had on other performers who have struggled with those kinds of persecutions and repressions as well. And it seems that my brother, by simply being true to himself and working hard to be great at what he did, acted as an inspiration and a beacon for other people.
Number 1, 26-year-old Toller Cranston from Canada, 7th after the compulsories.
And the most exotic skater I think that I've ever seen is John Curry is the most elegant. This is the most exotic, the most bizarre, the most unusual and extraordinary stylist I think I've ever seen. First move, a double axel. Here it is. Good one. Next one is his triple double jump combination. Here it is. First a triple salchow into a double toe loop. Look at the flair in this.
An artist on and off the ice. Quite a painter.
Look at the position in this camel.
Philippa, Toller's messages, they're so important, as we've said this all the way through, for the world of the arts. And the book itself, it carries such a powerful message that big dreams are hard work, and if you do that, this bold and successful life is within reach. What do you want your readers, what do you want our viewers to take away from Toller's legacy?
I think what I would hope people would take from this is they would see his life in some ways as a mirror of their own. So the values of courage, creativity, expression, being yourself, working hard, chasing your destiny, that's something that everybody can do, and in Toller's view, must do to achieve that life. So there's no point in waiting, just do the work and pursue the dreams. But it goes hand in hand with do the work, be who you are, and be brave. And I'm finding that message is resonating. So I don't believe the book is being read as simply a biography where someone is a passive spectator to this life. I believe, and I see it every single day, people are saying, oh, that's me. Oh, I relate to that. Oh, I understand that. Oh, I remember how I felt like that. And that is why the book is having such huge success. That and the fact that it's getting some recognition. And thank you so much. And on behalf of the Firebird Awards for supporting this book, I'm deeply, deeply grateful. And I'm hopeful that more people will discover a Canadian figure skater who kind of changed the world.
Definitely. And Philippa, where can we learn more about you, buy the book and so on, please?
Yes, thank you. My website is philippacranstonbarron.com, and you could simply Google Toller, T-O-L-L-E-R, and you'll get some duck-tolling dogs. There's dogs called duck-tolling dogs, but mostly you'll get Toller Cranston. And the book, Toller Cranston, Ice, Paint, Passion, should be at the top of the Google list. The book is certainly available from Amazon and wherever books are sold.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you, Philippa.
Thank you, Audrey. It's been a pleasure for me too.
As we come to the last part of Skits and Quibbles, it's always important to reflect on some of the messages that our incredible industry experts give us. And today's has just been a shout out there to be creative and to be authentic with our own creativity. We're talking about art today. Picasso said every child is an artist. The secret is learning to remember to stay an artist as the child grows up. And I think that is